Yeah, thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. My name is Nandagopal Jayaram. That's a mouthful first name. I just go by Nan. That's my user-friendly name. So today we'll be talking a little bit about the context and the context layer. Really, we'll start with the agentic shift, a quick level set. We've all had quite a bit of treatise today since morning sessions about what agents are, context layer, and so on. So I'm going to take it a little more deeper, a little more practical, maybe even show a couple of screens in action with context, without context, how stuff works, right? And kind of draw that distinction. Why is it becoming critical? Context intelligence layer, what are the building blocks? Then also evolving your data stack. So as you build context, like how is your data stack today, and what new components or additions you may have to make. And we look at that context intelligent framework. That's a mouthful. In action, it's a sort of an accelerator that we have that can speed up things. So what best to kind of show and tell, kind of a thing. So we plug that in. And thank you for the audio folks. They had to install a special equipment on last minute request, so I can share my screen here. And then we'll kind of end with summary Q&A at that point. So the agentic shift, right? So we know, I'll kind of go through this fast. Agent level set, agents can reason and act, much like humans do. It's an evolution from copilots to sort of agents, right? Much like humans. So basically, how do they understand, reason, and act? I'm not necessarily going into the transformer architecture, that kind of layer, but still at a logical layer. You first ask a question, using the same natural language construct that LLMs have, facilitated, asking, searching documents, query structured data, that type of stuff. Then you understand the context aware interpretation. Like, when you ask a question, how do you resolve against your company's terminology or bibliography or glossary, whatever that might be. And also from a point of view of user, from a context standpoint, and from the operating situation standpoint, there is very, very specific context that needs to be understood. Then you have to reason, kind of see the causes, the options, trade-offs in order to answer that question, and sort of assemble your response together, or kind of recommend the next best action. Finally, then you act on it. The agent can invoke a tool, or can kind of execute a workflow, trigger update systems, whatnot. So there could be a plethora of tools in its belt that, depending on the context and the reasoning, it would invoke those actions. So that's kind of just still a level set. Where are agents being prominent today? Let's kind of look at our own spaces in data analytics. Natural language querying is becoming top of mind. Really, any customer we talk to, they're all trying to do natural language querying. Automated insight generation. I don't want to go to my dashboard. I don't want to interpret. Just let me know when I have to take an action. Or furthermore, take the action. If I'm comfortable with human in the loop, take the action. That's kind of the base expectation. And also in some other back of the house things, say you have an observability tool, you want to see why a pipeline failed. You might deploy an agent there that can, give you a lot of specific root cause analysis, so you can go fix the problem. Those are some places in the data analytics landscape itself where agentic AI is prominent. The other place we see quite a bit of activity is in the knowledge and the decision space. Enterprise search, research summarization, policy, procedure, guidance, and decision support. One of the Fortune 500 retailer that we are working with has a lot of warehouses, and there's a lot of OSHA regulation that changes, in hours, and then they end up paying quite a bit of fines because it takes time for them to interpret that regulation and make changes to their standard operating procedures. So, can we deploy agents to understand the regulation, understand and map all the areas that need to change your SOPs, your training guides, and all of that? And then kind of make a recommendation and bring human in the loop to kind of fix, right? So that's a pretty classic example of where an agentic solution can be very, very effective. Finally, operations and workflows, we see quite a bit of activity there. We have a life sciences company that is looking to automate all of their support tickets. They make lab reagents, and they get about 3,000 queries all across the world that requires subject matter expert to interpret and answer those questions. Now, that's a lot of time away from high value add activity. But if you don't answer those questions on time, it's a customer experience issue, right? So, could you deploy an agent with sufficient context to actually assemble a response and bring that to the human in the loop type of stuff? So, those are some typical areas where we've seen a surge, right, in terms of agentic solutions. Customers come very informed, they want that piece. But for all of those to work, right, you really have to have a few different building blocks, and we'll talk about what those building blocks are really quick. But sorry. So let's kind of take one example of self-service analytics, right? You know how self-service was to remove this developer in the middle. Business users could go create their own dashboard, and for doing that, you had to make sure the columns and the table relationships were simple enough for the business at a metric level, where a business user could drag and drop and create their own dashboard. Sort of, you were inventing a simple semantic layer at that point in time. This was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But right now with agentic AI, right, that's kind of where in the past, human would bring the logic and the context while consuming the data overall. But today, you have dashboards like that, but the humans or the business users expect to converse with the dashboard. The dashboard on the left is a safety dashboard. It's a transportation company that monitors incidents with kids, right? So how many kids got bit by a bee on while on the bus? That's kind of that distribution there. So I want to know which section, which county, which school system, is there any kind of repeat incidents that so that's something that dashboard may not necessarily say, but I should be able to have a an intelligent conversation with that, and make my decisions based on that. So that's kind of a shift in expectation that's happening. So that's kind of the agentic level set, where we are, where it applies, and so on, right? Let's take a look at context layer and why it really matters. So take an example, a scenario here. This is a high value cancellation. Sarah calls a telecom company to cancel a telecom internet service. And so the raw data elements are her customer ID is known, her monthly spend is known, contract status is known, support ticket, right, showing up as cancelled service. The AI is logic, right? If an agent were supporting this, ticket, Sarah is a month-to-month customer with low digital engagement. Let her cancel, right? In fact, make her cancellation process easy. Don't give too much trouble, or don't try to retain. Just kind of help her out through the process. That might be where we conclude. But let's say you have a little bit of a context. Let's take a context of a relationship, right? She's not just a 120 per month customer. She's CEO of a local startup that just signed a 50,000 enterprise contract with the same company. So a little bit of that context now shifts dramatically. Sarah is not a simple use case where you don't pay attention to, right? So sentiment context, her three support calls were about intermittent outages during peak hours, and notes say that she was highly frustrated. So that's again a sentiment context that if you have, the way you interpret and what action you would take with that ticket agentically, right? Speaking will be very different. Finally, market context. A competitor just launched a fiber for startups promotion in her specific zip code. So if you have all of those things, right, the company also has a rule: never lose a B2B customer a decision maker even on their personal account. So they have that policy. So if you have all of these contexts, now the way you deal with that ticket would be dramatically different. So that's the power of context. Context is very much in play for humans automatically because of how we think, how we assimilate information. Context is continuously forming in the backdrop of our thoughts, right? And we are also implementing it, but that's not the case with your data. Data is a snapshot, it may not be real time, and also data as in when you may not even be capturing context in so many instances. So anyway, so context is everything. With context and without context, how does that go? Traditional AI, I've canceled your service. Here's a generic $10 discount, or follow a standard retention workflow, right? That's kind of the likely path it'll take. The agentic with context, I see you have had 3 outages. I've already alerted a regional tech lead to fix the node. That could be a response. Or a VIP executive bundle that syncs our home and office reliably. That could be a response. Or with a proper, really well set up context, it could trigger a white glove escalation to the enterprise account manager because it understands it's a 50K at stake, not a 120 without contract customer trying to cancel. Right, so that's the context. Okay, so let's kind of keep that in mind as we kind of explore a little bit of what makes up context intelligence layer. Now, we know context is important. Already you've got all of your data assets from applications and all of those things. Then what is a context intelligence layer? Is it another tool? Is it a framework? Is it, where does it sit? There's so many questions. I have an MDM. Can that be my context layer? Can my Snowflake actually allow me to use store context as well? So there's so many pathways here. I'll kind of explain a little bit. So there is really from a foundation standpoint, you have your data foundation. I'll not go too much into it. Really, the middle part, the structural meaning, that's what defines the context, the semantics, the entity resolution, knowledge graphs, and cognitive maps. Right, I'll kind of go into each of those areas. And once you have that, the permission to act on it, that's the dynamic intelligence that agents have. That could be furthermore, and that could be a separate topic, maybe next year or sooner. So structural meaning, semantics, right? Semantics is a translation layer. So in your database, you might have MRR underscore val, which is 120. It's really a monthly recurring revenue. That's the semantic definition. Or you may have tenure days for Sarah. She's been with the telecom fiber as a customer for 1460 days. But really, the semantic interpretation of that could be a 4-year loyalty milestone, right? And that changes, right? Because that's temporal. A more number of days elapsed, the loyalty also changes. Same with enterprise flag equal to true, means she's a B2B decision maker as well, right? So that's kind of where the semantics comes into play. Without semantics, AI is just a calculator. With semantics, it becomes a business partner. It begins to become a business partner. There's more pieces to it. So number one, right? So number two is entity resolution. Sarah may be in a CRM system as Sarah Smith, Sarah at startup.com, so many different identifiers, right? All of them are not different entities or not different customers. They're the same person. So that kind of merging the disparate records and having one. So that's your master data management principle that continues to apply today. So that's why you see a lot of MDM companies also trying to become the de facto context layer as we speak, which I haven't fully defined yet, and I will in the next couple of slides. So with entity resolution, the agent follows a standard script and treats VIP like a stranger. With resolution, it knows, okay, there's actually a B2B decision maker, so I need to escalate at that point. So that's the second concept. The third concept is a knowledge graph. Knowledge graph transform like isolated data points, right, into something that you can act on. Our minds do that way, right? You kind of take disparate points and you can connect, and it's a great pattern recognition engine. But how do you kind of distill that into a layer that you can make it available side by side by your data, so your agents can consume it, right? So the multi-hop reasoning. Sarah is a CEO of a startup, is a tier one partner. That's the hidden context. Any CEO of a startup in our accelerator program is automatically a tier one stakeholder, right? So that's kind of the policy of the company. And so then you can build these kind and model these relationships that can then be consumed by your agents, right? So that again becomes a pillar of what your context is. So moving from search to understanding, mapping how your business really operates. Then the fourth one is cognitive maps. So you have a new employee, you got playbooks. Like, this is something that we are working on. We do quite a bit of software development, and we've kind of blown up our software development process completely, right? And we are redoing our SDLC. Whoever thought, like, you would have to recreate your software development lifecycle process? So we are kind of doing that in a very atomic level right now because of AI. So AI is infused across the board right now in what we do. But what we're doing is a little playbook for every employee, right? And the playbook is supplemented by a skill set. So they use the playbook to understand how to do their work, but they use a set of skill set libraries to actually do the work with the AI. So that way, everybody, the way they work with AI is standardized. So that way, I can take a person with, a certain unit level of knowledge with cloud, whatnot, and use it in the same way as an expert would use it, because those prompts are codified in our skill set markdown files, which is all checked into Git, and it's kind of managed in a very active way. So the point there is the playbook, right? The playbook has the human steps, the intelligence that was required to kind of execute a certain task. In this case, a playbook would have been, for VIP as penning outage, ignore standard AI troubleshooting scripts and trigger a immediate human-led escalation. That kind of logic, right, is very critical for the agents to work just like humans would. So that's the cognitive map. It kind of translates the tribal knowledge, right? As I was talking about the skill set markdown files that we have for software development at different places, like that, every business has a tribal knowledge that needs to be captured and infused into your context layer. So those are like the four key pillars to kind of begin with, right? So where do you go from there? If you evolve your data stack, right? This is your standard framework. Many you may have seen many variations of this today. You have all your data sources, your application data sources, and you kind of pull it in and you stage it. And and you have a whole bunch of consumers: the analytics, dashboards, products, data science, partner data delivery, all of those things. So the agentic world requires more context, and how it falls short is it's really the facts, focuses on the facts, the data itself, and not really the why. But how do you sort of bring, it's also acting on snapshots of data. It's not continuous in nature, because a dashboard or insights, it was acceptable to ingest data once every night. That's not enough for your agents. They need up to date information if they have to be autonomous and act on that, right? And then it lacks context, not primed for agentic consumption. So there's a whole context that's missing. So you can also think about it in terms of unstructured data. Very structured data sets from your applications are all curated and put into your data warehouses, data lakes, whatnot. What about unstructured data? There was not a very strong impetus or push to bring those things inside your the data assets. But now there is, that is the agentic consumption, and what agents need to do, right? So that's kind of where the context is lacking. So if you do actually bring it in, right, it might look like this. There is a context intelligent framework that just understands the organization's knowledge and semantics and entities, knowledge graph, cognitive maps, and brings it all together in a live manner. So it's keeping it up to date all the time. And it's based on some LLM frontier models. And it basically sits there between the consumption and your data assets today. So that's kind of logically a good place to kind of position. So it's not really redoing your entire data lake. It's kind of a supplementary layer that brings a dramatic understanding of the context to the agents, which is actually a new consumer that's also added to the left here. So anyway, those are like the fundamentals, right? Like where it exactly stays and where it exactly kind of uh, intervenes today to kind of bring that sort of context layer. So let's take a look at this in action. A lot of this type of conversation is very theoretical. So I have a small demo here. I'm going to exit out of this, and I appreciate the folks at the back. They were able to. Oh, I can't show my screen. Okay, there you go. So this is a little context accelerator. Um, this is weird. So my glasses is kind of little too far away. It's kind of intermediate for me, so I'll just manage it from you. So I have several chips here, right? So basically, it's a context accelerator. It's a little engine that sits between your data and your enterprise knowledge and all of that. Not sure how visible it is. Okay. Uh, so let's say we have a whole bunch of documents in the company, right? And those documents could be policy documents, SOPs, reference guides, glossaries, semantic maps. You can throw what all you have into this sort of accelerator. It crunches all that data, and it kind of understands the meaning behind it, and it does so automatically. So it's really where you're applying AI agentic methods to really help with the context. So it's kind of very meta, right, in terms of how you're applying AI to kind of help your other AI use cases. So in this here, for example, a freight solutions company, right, it has an enterprise business glossary. They have extracted, and it forms this sort of a knowledge graph, a carrier and a freight solution, right, from how it relates to a carrier, and then the freight solutions, maybe this one. It's a poor performing lane. Customer success team relates to that. Capacity operations team defines it. A margin is related to a poor performing lane. Finance team defines it. So basically, it can sort of decipher that relationships based on what you throw at it. You can throw other types of documents, like a policy document on how you would onboard a particular carrier. So this is a logistics company that does transportation pickups and drop offs. So they schedule all of that intermediate things that's required. Pricing and rate terminology, your standard operating procedures. You throw everything, and it kind of comes back, and it self informs, and it builds that context layer for you internally. Finally, it also kind of looks at the context extraction. As it does, it identifies, okay, a poor performing lane is something that gets talked about in this company a lot. I need a formal definition of what it is, right? A lane is a shipping lane, where you're shipping goods back and forth. And what does it mean for that lane to be a poor performing, right? And so it kind of defines it, and it waits for your approval if you want to accept that as a definition or not. Of course, you can reject it and modify it, and then you can rerun all that ingestion, and it kind of builds that entire glossary for you from scratch. Not only that, as this glossary changes, it keeps up with the real-time nature to it, right? If there's a change management occurs, and if somebody changes the definition of certain KPIs, it can kind of keep up with that piece. So that's a very critical part of context design. You want to be on top of that type of definitions. So those were the two places, and let's go and ask a question. I'll just pick which customer experienced the largest margin decline this quarter and why. So it takes a little bit of time. We run a couple of queries here. What it does is it runs with the context turned off, not using any context at all. And where is the context coming from? All those documents that it has auto ingested, and it has built that entire knowledge graph. That's one part. And then we turn it on and we rerun the exact same query. And we'll see how they kind of show next to each other, if it shows. But it should show up here any minute. But it does take time a little bit, but because it also, one side of it actually traverses the knowledge graph, right? So it's taking a lot more. Usually it does than pre-demo phase. But here it is. So the original question, right, was which customer experienced the largest margin decline this quarter and why, right? And you will see, let me see if I can make this slightly bigger. Okay, that's better for me too. So the context engine is disabled here, and it said Sunshine, Citrus Packers, Golden Valley Canning experienced the largest margin decline. Because when you ask a question like which customer experienced the largest margin decline this quarter, what's the definition of the quarter is a critical piece. Without context, the LLM will figure it out. It'll say, yeah, a quarter must be this closely, and it'll convert that to a SQL query, run it, and kind of generate the response. That's what it does here, right? It's about 50% confidence, but the term is current quarter versus previous quarter, margin decline, any decline greater than zero. It's making up some of the rules. There's no graphs, no docs, and it ran a SQL statement. It's pretty long because it had to compute everything from scratch. It didn't really know if there was a semantic layer which already had certain definition. It had no idea of that piece. And so on the other side, right, context engine enabled, it actually gives you a very different response. It gives you a different set of customers, and that's because it applies a approved definition of a current quarter, right? And it says starting April 1st represents a period of interest as indicated by demo data, assumes a current quarter is that, and that's the closing quarter that it basically interprets. So because of that, the answer completely changes. But not only that, it gives you citations. Why did I answer the way I did? Which document informed my approach? And so it can kind of give you a level of confidence in how the context engine basically assemble the response. So as you kind of go in here, the SQL becomes much simpler, just about 10 lines, because it knows the right tables it needs to go after. In the first case, without context, it would have looked at all the columns, figured it out, and it put a big query together. That might cause more consumption on your Snowflake. It might cost you a little bit more money there, but on the same side, you may not get it right as well. So that's kind of what it does. It kind of addresses those two aspects of it, and it also kind of looks at several documents that it's cited, and you can see margins, what are the quality risk metrics. All of those have taken part in assembling that answer, and same with the graph, knowledge graph as well. It took these different things into consideration in order to build out that SQL that kind of generated that response. And so you can say why the answer differs. It kind of gives you this, but primarily I think it's the quarter by quarter interpretation. and a few other citations that you can see here. So very, very different approach, right? So a context accelerator that's always living, that's not very integrated with your data assets. It's standalone, but it's always ingesting the context, whether it be a meeting notes, policies, KPIs, you name it. You can feed it with human in the loop approvals governed, right? And that's kind of informing the way an agent or a natural language query interprets your data. So with that kind of a thing, you're building a very live system that is adding a layer of human sort of intelligence, right, to how to interpret your data. So anyway, you're kind of preparing your overall system for agentic use with that kind of concept. So let me go back to the presentation. That was the demo there. So we saw that. Then, so as you design this, a couple of quick things. Are we on time? Okay. So context versus semantic layer. We kind of talked about it. This is a very common question we get. Context layer does not replace a semantic layer. It kind of supplements it. Semantic is proper definitions, and context brings all the soft context that humans generally use in their decision making to also be used by agents. Well, data and cloud platforms, provide that context management. They are advancing rapidly. Many platforms have that, but I think enterprise context will not necessarily, my opinion, not reside right next to with your application data assets. Because there is so much of unstructured data all around. You will need that kind of flexibility. You can always add a layer on top of your data or cloud platform to kind of bring that piece in. Data catalog can become the context hub. They are evolving significantly to that, but they're not yet the complete context layer as we speak. So I have about, 20, 30 such questions that we've kind of compiled it all into a little playbook, sort of a, practical guide to, giving AI the best context so they can, work with your data kind of standpoint. So that's downloadable here. And also there is that QR code on the cards on your chairs as well. So really quick, we bring several accelerators, frameworks, assessments to elevate your data maturity. We define strategy where you are and also execute it from that standpoint. We work on building very specific, point solution and kind of plugging it back into the enterprises with some of the larger customers that we have. That's kind of what Co-Strategics does. This is also our 20th year in business. Also because CDOIQ is also 20 years. Although Mark has been associated much longer, I've been associated with CDOIQ for about 3-4 years now. So those were the questions I had. And if anyone is interested in a very specific demo within your business context, how this might work, happy to do that as well.